Officially welcome to the podcast, Erin.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, so Erin and I, we every time before I get a guest on, we always talk beforehand. I think we've already had this podcast, but on the telephone. But we got here today and we couldn't actually remember what we were here to talk about.
That's right, standard operating procedure for both of us, I think, David.
Yeah, no. Well, now, I've got to do the official thing. Now, look, so I know Erin as a friend and we grew up in the same district of Western Australia, but I actually went and had a look at your LinkedIn page and you've been a busy girl, right? And am I allowed to say girl?
You can.
That sounds condescending, and I don't mean like that. Anyway.
That's fine.
Busy lady, right? Vice Chair, Independent Director of a Growers Group, Council Member of the Council Arab Relations, Council Member, yeah. Non-Executive Director of Australian Grain Technology, Chair of Mount Burdett, which we'll talk about, and the Regional Advancement Committee, did I get that right? Past Director of MLA. And of course, past Executive Officer of Southern Dirt and Evergreen down in good old Coachie, and the graduate of the Rural Leadership Programs. Wow, a long way from a farm girl from Mobrup, Erin.
Yes, it's a long way, but it's all interconnected. I think back through all those things that you list and think they all fit together quite nicely as a bit of a jigsaw of a journey that I've gone on. I tend to stay away from a career. I don't feel like it's been a career, very much a journey from farm days.
That's a really interesting concept, isn't it? Because when we grow up on farms, we don't really have, I never grew up with this concept of career, isn't it? We just sort of do.
That's right, and I sometimes reflect on that, thinking maybe that's something that in an agricultural sense is something that we could actually adopt so that the outside perception is a little bit more about farmers and people that are involved in farming related businesses actually do refer to it as a career in agriculture.
Yeah, do you often hear, you're involved in many different committees and agribusiness generally, but do you ever hear people refer to themselves as having an agri-career, or you might have an agri-business career maybe, but you wouldn't have a farm business career? Do you ever hear that term bandied about?
Certainly farming business, because I'm a big advocate of referring to farming as a business, as it is. As a farming business career, maybe not so much. Then I think, well, have I actually asked that question? I may not have asked the question in order for that answer to come forth as well.
Yeah, definitely. So you weren't always a jet-setting rural leader. You grew up in Mobrup. It was so same as me. So down in so for those of you from the rest of the world in Australia, Mobrup is in the southwest corner of Western Australia, about 2.5, 3 hours from Perth, and about 1.5 hours from Albany. So right in sort of the middle-ish.
Middle of everywhere.
Middle of everywhere. Middle of everywhere, but Mobrup itself, although it's in the middle of everywhere, it's on the way to nowhere. like you get to Mobrup and then there's just bush until you hit the ocean. Really.
Well, nobody pops in on the way past, put it that way.
Yeah.
They're coming specifically to see you or somebody else in that area, which is special in itself.
Yeah, so we don't have any through traffic.
No.
So tell us about your experience. So everyone who comes on has generally got some experience in the country. So tell us about your experience growing up in the country and growing up in Mobrup.
Gosh, it's foundational to everything I do now, having that upbringing in the country and the freedom of being in the country, and it's been something I've been thinking about recently. Around everything I did was involved around the farm and farming people, and I think that's been a phenomenal grounding for everything that I've done now, and I constantly reflect back on that. The values that you grow up with, the work ethic you grow up with. So really, really fortunate to have that kind of upbringing. And then I guess as the journey's continued, then also fortunate to be able to take it to other places and share my knowledge and experiences elsewhere with others that haven't had that opportunity. And it's also made me very, very passionate about helping as many people as possible actually get that opportunity too, to have that involvement in regional and rural areas as well.
Even though you grew up a farm girl, did you ever aspire to or believe you'd have a career in agriculture or agribusiness? Was that always at the top of your mind? That
It never crossed my mind once. I certainly didn't see, and almost back to what we were talking about before, I didn't see it as a career that I might have. I certainly, as I got older, I wanted to farm, but growing up I hadn't seen farming as such to be a career. Whether that's a gender-based thought process, I was always brought up to believe that I could do anything boys could do, and my back and muscles probably show for that nowadays. So I certainly grew up being knowing that I was capable of doing anything. Did I see that as a potential career? Probably not. Saw other things as things I might want to do. But the career that I initially went into, so I started out at uni as a primary school teacher. And the reason I decided to be a primary school teacher is I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to live in the country. So I thought, rightio, well, let's look at careers that involve getting to live in the country, and there'd be plenty of work opportunities for the rest of my life in the bush. So that directed me to primary school teaching, which took me back to bush.
Yeah, definitely. So I think most primary schools in every country town in Australia would be killing for more primary school teachers right now.
Very, very much so. And nurses and lots of other roles as well.
Yeah, I know. So and also that would have been a bit unusual, because I don't know if it still happened at the time, but nurses and teachers I knew used to have to do a country stint, didn't they? Was it part of the uni, or after uni you got 2 years, you had to do a amount of time or years in the country?
I don't know if you had to. There was certainly, you had more chance of getting a job. So it was very, certainly in my day when we left uni, gosh, that makes me sound old, doesn't it? In my day.
In my day, when everything, like when Fergus, our youngest, was young, he used to say, Dad, back in the old days when everything was black and white.
Things can still be pretty black and white. So I don't know, I don't recall there being anything hard and fast, but there was more chance of getting a job. So you knew of all the remote communities in Western Australia when you were at uni, because you were thinking, I could get posted to any of those, and I'm going to take it, because back then there were also only a third of graduates were getting jobs. So if you were offered a job, it didn't matter where it was, you were going to take it, because otherwise you sitting behind the next year of graduates. So I think there was that encouragement to go read.
So different to now. Like I was just saying, how really much jobs are. I mean, I heard the other day that a lot of resource companies are trying to recruit kids out of high school now. They're so desperate. So, but when we sort of left uni in the early 90s, it was like there was 200 people lining up for every job that you went for.
Yeah.
It was such a different world, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's one of the things that drives me doing what I do now, in making sure that anybody that thinks they might be interested in a career in agriculture, and even if they haven't thought of it, I'll plant it in their mind, given the opportunity, is to actually make sure that industry draws them in and opens their arms and brings them into the industry, because somebody else will otherwise, because it's such an incredible market for employees at the moment that they will be courted, as you said, from even earlier stages now. So from a point of view for our industries, it's like we've got to draw them in and make them want to be working for us, because otherwise somebody else is going to come through and sweep them up and offer them things. But if they've gone into a tertiary or a vet course, TAFE course, whatever, with an interest in ag, we've got to keep pulling them through at our end to make sure they actually end up in our industry.
Yeah, I was just talking with a guest the other day, and he made an amazing point, and he said that these days that everybody, and quite rightly, and I think are looking for purpose in their jobs, right? And I think this is probably the one thing, well, not just the one thing, but there's something that the current generations coming to the workforce have got right, is they want purpose in their positions. And I think because, you know, sometimes maybe there's been a lot of purpose ripped out of jobs over the last 30 or 40 years. And he said, if you want purpose, agriculture's got it ready loaded. You don't have to go looking for it. You can be a scientist, you can be a commodities trader, you can be a farmer, you can, it doesn't matter what job you want. Agriculture has one of those for you with purpose.
Absolutely, exactly. And that, I think we've all got a lot better at reflecting on what our values and what's important to us, and people are matching that with their career now. And I have some random fantastic conversations with people that are looking exactly for that, a purpose. They want to be a part of a system that helps feed the world. They want to be going, check, radio, bring it on. Want to be part of looking after our land and looking after our people. Absolutely, you can find a career there. And so there's some fascinating conversations with people that we've got to keep on having to help people connect the dots. So that's what I think I spend my life doing is connecting dots. And it's not a business model. It's a very satisfying, and it gives me purpose to actually say, hey, you should talk to such and such, and it can happen at a party on a Saturday night, or it can happen at a conference when you're getting a scone and jam and cream or something tasty that you shouldn't have in the middle of the day. So that's really satisfying to help connect those dots with people that had not even considered that agriculture could that it could serve their purpose.
Yeah, definitely. I think who is it? Seth Godin would probably call you a maven. Mavens collect and share information, and so it's definitely. But that idea of connecting people in agriculture and giving them a purpose. Simon Sinek, I think, wrote a book around, and it was a study around what motivates people at work. I think it was Simon. I might get it right.
Probably, that would be one of my favourite YouTubes.
But I hear about why.
Yes.
He did that great thing about why. Yeah. But this one was around what motivates humans to work. So you mentioned pay. So it was really interesting. They did and he is referencing a bunch of study, but one of the ones is pay won't motivate you to work, so bonuses don't really work, those sorts of things. But the pay has to be right. Does it make sense? So the pay has to reflect your worth, and it has to help you meet your needs. You know, your mortgage and all that sort of stuff. But it won't motivate you. Motivation, he worked out, really comes down to three things: purpose, autonomy, and mastery. So, and he goes, that's generally a combination of those three is what drives human motivation. So you can't, and so it was just interesting. You can't pay someone to be more motivated.
That's right.
But you can give them other things, and one of them is purpose, obviously.
And that underpinned in that is communication, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's actually having the conversation, because what motivates you might be different to what motivates me. So it's actually all about, within a business, having that conversation, and regardless of what business you run, to not make assumptions about what people's drive is going to be.
And I think we tend to have especially growing up, let's say we all grew up in the country, so it's the world we knew and understand, and we're trying to attract people from outside in, right? And we go, well, it's obvious, look at it.
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you like this? And they're kind of like, I don't get it, right? Because, you know, the way they see the world, the way they're brought up, their value systems, it might be completely different. So, like you said, it's beholden on us to try and articulate why it's amazing. Because it's not obvious.
No, it's not. And you can articulate it sometimes, and then people have different learning styles too, so then you need to find other ways that it's going to resonate to actually, it's like the whole, we'll come down and work for a day, or come to wherever you are and be in the business, be in the environment for a day, and because that's also going to give people insights too, isn't it?
And it's also those paradigms, and I think, especially for attracting, in AgNet we have to attract so many people from outside of agriculture, because that's where all the people live. There's not many people in ag anymore. Right? So I think I heard a quote the other day, actually, from a podcast I'll release later, is only 2% of people living in agribusiness are farmers. Right?
That doesn't surprise me.
So most people live in the city, even in agribusiness. Right? So take people to a farm, and I found this, you take people to a farm the first time, like a modern farm, they're going, wow, this is not what I pictured, right? And, the technology and the infrastructure and the systems, and most people have never really, there's a picture of agriculture which I think was set sometime in the 20s.
Yes.
Right? Which we love to trot out every now and then when we put pictures on the front of everything. But
I don't.
But that's not what it looks like in reality.
Yeah. And I think social media is a fantastic vehicle. All the different platforms are out there. The algorithms are such that people are still not necessarily going to see that. So we think we've got a whole lot of cool stuff out there showing what farmers do, but we're actually talking to ourselves based on those algorithms as well. So it's utilising social media in a smart way to actually get, so for those people that you can't get out onto a farm to actually see all this cool stuff that we do, that we're somehow infiltrating in another way using social media and algorithms. So.
Yeah, so how would someone in Perth, Melbourne or Sydney find themselves on an agricultural social media feed?
And the question is how, but it's also a why. What will stimulate them to think, oh, I wonder what kind of machinery is used to do this, or I wonder why or how this particular genetics are bred for this loaf of bread. That's awful, isn't it?
I think the only social media feeds my boys watch that have got anything to do with agriculture is little kids being run over by dogs and sheep. Really.
Which is not great. That's not the kind of messages we want out there.
No,
it doesn't happen a lot.
Now you had a non-standard farming father, a bit like I had. I had a father who ran sheep and wrote software. You had a father who was a member of parliament.
I certainly did.
And Bill was a member for what, 22 years?
22 years, that's
22
right.
years. Do you know what I always remember as a kid? You were the only person I know who called your mum and dad Bill and Margot. And I was going, that's so strange. What about mum and dad?
Well, it was even stranger, it was Mum and Bill.
Oh, Mum and Bill?
No, it wasn't even Margot and Bill, it was Mum and Bill.
Mum and Bill, so Dad was always Bill.
I remember getting asked in primary school if I was adopted, because I didn't call my dad, because he's not, well, he's Bill.
Now, growing up, you grew up on a farm in isolated Mobrup, but your dad was a long-term member at MLC?
Yes, MLC.
MLC.
Yeah, member of the Legislative Council.
Yeah. Now you have during farming, but certainly post-farming, let's call it, have had a very public life and a very much a life around giving. I looked through all the things that you're involved in. It's all about giving back and getting involved and making a difference. Do you think growing up with a father who was a member of parliament, influenced you in any way even subtly to the career that you now find yourself pursuing?
It's a really good question, David, because I've reflected a bit on that and thought absolutely. And my mum was president of the West Australian Red Cross as well, and that's a very, very giving role too. So, and when Dad/Bill went into Parliament, he went there as a community service because he wanted to make a difference. It wasn't a career move. He was a farmer that was wanting to give back and make a difference for the industry that he loved and grew up with. So very much I think it comes back to our upbringing and the values that we're brought up with. I don't feel it was a you should do this and you should do that as far as giving back. They just did, and the whole community just did. As you said, it's funny when you said, well, we were isolated. I never felt isolated. And when I was there as an adult, it was very different. Growing up in Mobrup, I certainly didn't find it isolating.
Well, it wasn't really. There was a lot of families. We had our own little hall.
Yeah, that's right.
We did, events at the Mobrup Hall. We had a tennis club, a badminton club.
21st there last year.
Last year, of course.
In your dreams, Erin. It was absolutely. So funny that you say isolated, which yes, I look back and go, yes, it was. At the time, it wasn't. So that growing up, the values of you get home on the school bus after terrorising the younger kids on it, and you get off, you grab afternoon tea, and then you jump on the motorbike or out in the ute and you go and help feed the sheep or pick rocks. It was all new country. So you did all those things, and then you came home and had dinner and did your homework and did it all over again the next day. So never saw it as anything different, and that's the values that you grow up with of all pitching in and making a difference and getting shit done.
Yeah. And if you're in Mobrup or Coconut, there's going to be a stretch on a committee somewhere, isn't there?
There still is.
I think, I can't remember, in our local fire brigade, I always think Digby, your brother, was like the head of the fire brigade for all I can remember. It's probably Bill before that.
And my grandfather actually, he was the person that introduced the old CB radios into the fire brigades in Western Australia. So the advent of the two-way radio for communications in fire brigades.
Yeah.
Then I've got my sister over in the neighbouring town that also is in the centre of community and making a difference and putting a hand up. I guess that's the big thing I see. It's not waiting to be asked. It's actually putting a hand up because you see that there's something that needs doing, and that you can't wait for somebody else to, like. If I sit around waiting for other people to do stuff, it never happens. So
I don't think you have the patience, do you, Erin, to wait for other people to do it?
Very patient person, David. what I
You've got
feel,
things to do.
Oh, absolutely, things to do, places to go, people to meet. When I do it, though, I always want to bring along a crowd. So I never want to be charging ahead, just going off and doing it, because there's some stuff I don't like doing. So then you bring in other people that love it. So that, and there are lots of people that love doing the bits that I don't like doing. So then what this whole journey has given me is an amazing group of friends as well that you've developed over time in doing those things and seeing whether it's community or your industry or a group, whatever it is needs, and then you just go, who else is around here that might like to join me? And let's go.
Well, let's talk about joining things. Mount Burnett Foundation.
Burdett.
Sorry.
Burdett.
Do you know what? I was at my desk today and I go, David, don't get it wrong. I got it wrong. Mount Burdett Foundation. Now, you've been the chair of the I'll get this right, the Rural and Regional Advancement Committee for the foundation.
That's right.
For 3 years or so, maybe?
Probably is getting, I think it's getting up to 3 years now.
So tell me about this. I know the foundation, I think, started in Esperance or
Yeah,
something. So tell me a bit about the foundation, but and also in particular the role your committee plays within the foundation. I'd love to understand it a bit more because it seems like it's really grown.
It's a phenomenal concept that Chris Reichstein, who is a farmer in Esperance, he had terminal cancer, and so he knew he'd be leaving this mortal coil, as he called it, and so he also had a very strong set of values about community and industry, and was very passionate about the farming industry as well, or the agricultural industry as a whole. And so he felt that when he moved on, what was going to happen to his farm, you sell it and that's it. Or what he decided to do is actually leave the farm to a trust, so a charitable trust, and then the profit out of that charitable trust part would go towards an Esperance Community Foundation, which is part of the Mount Burdett, and then part of it would come to the Rural and Regional Advancement Foundation. So that farm is a working farm. It's managed by a farm advisory committee, and you had Andrew Fowler on the other day who chairs that advisory committee. And that's a great podcast, by the way. I really enjoyed that because I've known Andrew for a while, and it was really, you always learn something new of what he and Mari are doing. And so while the farm is still there will still be an income in order to make an impact in the Esperance community and throughout regional Western Australia at the same time. And there is nothing, it's an amazing privilege to get to help work out how we're going to distribute those funds. So one of the benefits out of it was Chris was around to help formulate what it needed to look like. So we've got a founder's intent that he wrote, and everything revolves around what he wanted and what his vision is. So to get to chair that foundation, it's an absolute. I go to use the word humble, but I listened to a podcast the other day that was talking about the word humble and the use of it or not. So I've stopped using it, but I'm still struggling.
Well, that's it. So you're not allowed to use it. So
it's lowering the value of something. Anyway.
Grateful?
Grateful? Yeah. So whatever the word is, it is
we're
very
going to have a workshop
How
on that.
cool. That's right. We can. Arrowine maybe. It's incredibly powerful to get to be somebody asked me recently why I did it. Because it's voluntary and I'll do it for as long as people are happy for me to do it. Because I guess I've spent a lifetime seeing things that could be done in regional communities around WA, and don't necessarily have the ability to do it. There are funding mechanisms, it's hard to get funding, it's hard to get people, and what Chris has left us with is the financial means to actually do those things. And so what drives our committee is making sure that it is as easy as possible while still maintaining suitable governance around the funds, because that's crucial, is how can we make it accessible to every person in a community to actually benefit and then make an impact in their communities. So that's an absolute driver for our committee, is make sure that it's reachable so it doesn't become a bureaucratic machine, that it will have impact. And that was what Chris was really passionate about. It's really worthwhile people watching his video. There's a 7-minute video on the website.
Okay, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. Yeah.
It's great just watching it, and then you get a real feel for, because he was still around to do the video to talk about what he was going to do, because he knew he was getting off.
That's pretty
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
So what sort of things does the organisation fund, or has it funded in the past, or?
It's the Rural and Regional Advancement Foundation part that is purely around capacity building. So that's about building skills, experiences, knowledge in our communities. So that's not the overarching whole foundation, but the Rural and Regional Foundation, Advancement Foundation is about the people, because it's not about building infrastructure, it's not about buying equipment. Chris is really big on people. It's actually about empowering people in our communities. Absolutely, it's just, without the support of our people out in communities, and as we touched on, they're getting less and less. Some of those people have really, really amazing ideas how to make it more and more, though, to actually attract people into their communities too. So the best people to do these things is the people that live in those communities themselves. So sometimes people in a community, I'll drive anywhere to talk to somebody in a rural town to go, how could we fit, how can we get funding? And I'm like, righty, I want to help you be successful in this. And so when I have those conversations with people, they're going, well, what sorts of things? And I was like, you live in the community, you guys are the very, very best people. And when I say guys, it's non-gender specific.
Generic guys.
You are the best people to know what you need. So you tell me the sorts of ideas you've got, and I'll tell you if it's going to fit or not. Or let's workshop it a bit and see how it might fit.
This reminds me, because you were talking about the interview and reform. One of the things I was so impressed towards the end of that podcast, he was talking about the work that him and Murray were doing in Conding Up, talking about investing in a community. And if you want to listen to that, they're doing it.
Listen all the way to the end. The thing I've noticed with your podcast is they're great at the beginning, of course, and the real diamonds come out towards the end in a lot of podcasts.
Isn't that the real any conversation though?
That's true. That's
right.
Very true.
It's like always saying with it, when you have dinner with friends, all the best conversations are had at the front door as they're leaving. It's kind of like,
because they're leaving.
It's like, before I go, did you hear?
It's actually interesting, because one of the groups that I used to manage, it was a statewide pasture-based group, and so people had come from a really long way away, and they weren't paid. These were farmers and researchers that took their time out of their jobs to devote to this grower group. And so when we did get together, I'd always make sure that it wasn't just a day meeting where people had zoomed in and zoomed out. We'd stay overnight, because we were going to have to at some stage anyway. So I'd actually put the meeting over 2 days, so maybe start at lunchtime, finish at the following lunchtime, because the absolute gems were over dinner, when everyone relaxed, had a nice steak or lamb, and a glass of red wine, and you'd actually sit, and in some cases sit up to 2 o'clock in the morning, and still talking about all the ideas and the concepts, and that, from an executive officer point of view, that's where I got the gold.
It's almost like you need to do a day of learning, then you need to digest it together almost, don't you? Like I think at Harvard and a number of those programs, they're all residential programs, and I think that's part of it, is that you're putting a bunch of leaders doing a program together for how many weeks or months, but even though they have a house, they might have a house in the next town, but the program's residential.
Well, I did my Australian Institute of Company Directors course that way, 5 days together, a group of women in Canberra, and it was so much more powerful. And you also develop a whole network. The challenge that we have though, David, is people don't have time in rural areas and probably outside rural areas as well. No, I'll rephrase that to we don't make time, because farming businesses, small businesses, family-owned businesses don't necessarily, they're doing so many things within their own business and their own communities that it's a real struggle to get people to be able to have the time to do that, because if they're doing that residential experience, it means something else isn't happening.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of the, it's one of the things I really like to reinforce in our industry is if somebody is off doing something, there's another person back at the farm or back at the business, whether it's a tyre service or whatever it is, somebody else still getting those things done, because it's not necessarily another person in that business to do it.
I think in all businesses we struggle with this concept that thinking is valuable, right? So we tend to have this idea that if we're doing something, that we're adding value.
Yep.
Right? But if you, and even if you understand this intellectually, it's still hard to create the discipline to do. But maybe just doing nothing for 2 days and just thinking about a problem might make you another 200 grand. But it's hard to then justify that to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a realisation that the Australian Rural Leadership Programme was great for making you stop and put value on the time to reflect, which I'd never, that was actually one of the big parts of that program is getting out of your comfort zone. And it took me a while to work out getting out of my comfort zone was actually to stop and be still. And it's like, what do you mean? What do you mean not do stuff? And one of my reflections around that is I love driving. Like, I will happily go for a drive anywhere. And I worked out that one of the reasons, so when I moved to the city and I wasn't doing 50,000 k's a year anymore, which is probably quite a small amount for some people listening, and might be a huge amount for others listening, then when I stopped doing that, I found that I was no longer having the creative thoughts that I used to have professionally. And so I was just going, oh, what's going on? I'm not doing that anymore. And I realised that I was driving half the amount of time, or I started flying more for industry commitments, lesser than driving. When you're flying, you keep working because you've got your laptop there. And so I actually realised that driving is my thinking time, and then once I stopped driving, I stopped giving myself that thinking time. But the irony is that the reason I was comfortable with that is I still felt like I was achieving something, because I couldn't possibly sit down for 4 hours, which would be the length of time it took to drive from Mobrup to Burdett, and just do nothing and think, or just listen to music. Couldn't possibly sit down and do that, but I could if I was driving, and suddenly it all seemed okay.
So you say, I'm going to go for a drive. What do? I have to...
Oh, I've done that. Living in the city, I've actually gone, my brain's not clear, I just want to go and think. And earlier on, I did literally get in the car and drive for an hour and a half out of the city. Out of the city, driving in the city didn't give me my clear thought. Get to Armadale and drive for an hour and a half, turn around and go back again. Might not be the most environmentally friendly answer, but that's what I felt like I needed to do. So I think you're absolutely right, we undervalue that being still and reflecting.
And I think this is, someone who asked me, what do I miss about farming? And I always say that I don't miss crutching wet sheep in the rain.
What's wrong with you?
But I do miss what is called drenching time. So we used to have 15 to 20,000 sheep, I can't remember at the time. So drenching took a long time, right? And so we used to start at 4 a.m. because of the heat, and probably drench until 11, and that was just all that time. You may have had the radio or the cricket on or something. Usually we used to finish before the cricket even started, but you'd be in your own head for the whole time. The same. I used to love walking behind sheep for 4 hours and mustering with the dogs with no car or radio. And even my father used to write down all his software while not in the office. He used to write it in his head while doing farm jobs. Right? And I said, so what I found exactly the same. When I moved to Perth 23 years ago, I feel like you never have quiet in your head anymore. You've lost that thinking time. So, like you said, you've got to deliberately create it. So, for example, I won't put the radio on the way to work. Because I know, and it always takes I always find that you've got to push through that. You've got 10 minutes of boredom, and then your brain goes, all right, I'll start thinking now.
Yeah, we're not very good at being bored, are we? Well, I refuse to be bored.
But you've got to sit through boredom until you start being creative. It's like it's a weird barrier you're going to put. Anyway, I just want to go back to circle back to rural and regional towns. You know, I was talking about we got sidetracked when we were talking about Andrew and Conia. And when you and I were talking before and talking about Mobrup, I've talked to so many guests about this, like the decline in country towns across Australia, but certainly across the world. I imagine this is a global phenomenon as agriculture consolidates or amalgamates. So, but we, you know, the idea, what Andrew and Mari inspired, he goes, wow, this is doable. Like they've done that levy, they've done a bunch of other stuff, they've got funding, they're really investing in their town. And you said to me on the phone, it's just like our old Progress Associations.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, they've got the world's best beach not far away.
Yeah, they do. we won't mention the fact that they're near surf and
literally is the world's best.
Yeah. So we're talking about it's 8 hours from Perth, but yeah, have you been there?
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So are the Seychelles.
Not a match for Warden Beach.
No. But at the same time, but I love this idea when you said Progress Association, and that's the thing. Our community, like many communities across Australia, especially in Western Australia, even we're in the age group where our parents were still clearing land, and everyone was a new landowner, and so you had a Progress Association that was about building community, and it was like building a hall and creating a club and doing this.
Even burning, like because we were clearing.
Yeah, we'd come together.
Come together because somebody needed to do something on their new land, but they needed the whole community to be there to help. Yeah,
clearing fires. I remember our whole 70s, and you and I probably played on the sidelines of clearing fires our whole life. So, you know, there would have been 40 or 50 fire units turn up from the community. You know, food would have been put on. We would have torched 200 or 300 hectares of rows of pushed down trees, and so
all in a controlled manner with wildlife corridors still maintained. But seriously, it was really clever.
Remnant vegetation.
It was very clever clearing. It was done with a lot of foresight.
Yeah, and a lot of old-fashioned stuff like clearing to the contour, and which seem like really modern concepts now.
Absolutely, it was. The vision for what the land needed was really.
But that community and that Progress Association got me thinking. We're almost back there again. So it's almost like, you know, now you might have a community with sometimes 7 to 20 just farmers in that community left. In your Mobrup, there's probably 3 or 4 really where we grew up. So it's almost now like if you want, and our Mobrup's too small, but let's say Kojonup or a smaller town, you now almost have to deliberately invest. Like it doesn't just, because eventually the towns just took over. They developed their own economy, and you know, I mean, you have to maintain clubs and stuff, but the actual economy of the town you didn't really have to do much with, did you?
And I think there's less people to do the jobs, and there's volunteer burnout is real. So you have to get smart about it as well to go, right, we can't keep going like this, because it's the same. I always was willing to be, when people go, it's the same people doing stuff. It's like, well, I'd rather be one of those same people always doing stuff. Yeah. But there's a limit to how much, and then other pressures start taking time as well. So it's whole families committing as well to building those communities, and so that's why I love being able to go out and talk about the foundation to people, because a lot of the time people have got the ideas, but because we need to be getting smarter at doing it, and maybe it involving less people or bringing in people from somewhere else to come in and help do it, then we can help that happen. Because I often say to people, you don't even necessarily need to think of something new. You could see something that's working in another community that is really effective. Bring them over to your community, come and talk about how you did it and what were some of the pitfalls. Learn from each other. You don't have to start from scratch. There are communities. There's one community over in, I'm not sure if it's New South Wales or Victoria, where there's a town that was struggling to get baristas, but there was a lot of retirees in town, and they didn't want to mess with their pension, obviously, but they were more than happy to learn a new skill and loved to go and have a chat. So they got trained up as baristas in their local coffee shop. They come in and do 2 or 3 hours, have a chat with all the people that came out. I thought, what a great concept of utilising people in the community that they didn't want to be standing all day and they couldn't do 12-hour shifts. They're happy to come in and put a stool in front of the coffee machine and learn how to do it really well and have a chat with the locals. Those sorts of ideas. It's like nobody needs to necessarily come up with anything new. Just scout around, have a look, see what somebody else is doing.
And I think that's another thing. It's like I've actually met a few people who retired from corporate jobs here in Perth.
I've got a great new term. It's called rewired because I'll never retire.
Yeah, rewired.
Yeah, I'll just keep doing stuff.
What they're doing is they have retired or stopped their previous corporate career and no longer technically, they're self-funded, I suppose you call them, but they're working harvest and seeding, driving headers and tractors now because there's only so much golf you can play, right?
It's one of the things that we identified with the foundation. Is one of our selection criteria is that the people that apply for the funding need to be assisting early mid-journey people. And so I often say to people that doesn't just mean young people being early mid, and the reason that we honed in on that was when Chris was still with us, we were going, well, where are the gaps in communities? And they go, well, if you're at a senior point in your career, then it's not so hard to get money, to get training and so on, because you've proven, and people, your business will back you and sees value in it. But somebody early or mid into this, like, it's a little bit harder. So we went, well, let's back this, because sometimes they're the ones that just need that extra bit of confidence in themselves or an extra skill. And so then anybody you could be early mid-career, David, because it's not age-based. So then it's somebody that wants to learn a new skill. So they've been an accountant for all their life. Yeah. And then they go, okay, I've had that part of my journey. I really want to learn to become a yoga teacher, for example. And they go and learn those skills in order to have an impact in the community to help, in that case, well-being of their community members, that kind of thing. So that's why we honed in on that early mid-career part, to actually get people to think about what are some skills that we need in our community in order to do X.
And also it's harder. So the traditional access to agriculture is, from outside in, is now, especially farming, the barrier is very, very high. So you may have been an accountant in Sydney your whole life, but always dreamed of being on a farm, right? Yeah. And so if someone said, okay, we're happy to train you and give you, you now can take this risk, maybe your kids have left school or whatever, it's almost a perfect opportunity. So I can do what I want to do at 18, I might be now 52 or whatever. Yeah, and looking for something to stimulate you. And I mean, certainly from our point of view, it's only for community impact, not individual businesses necessarily, but actually showing what a difference it makes. And how cool is that to get to a stage in your life that you go, you know what, I really enjoy doing what I've been doing for a long time, or it's been really, I haven't enjoyed it, and I'm glad I've got through it because I've educated my children, or for whatever reason stuck with it, and then to move on and give something new a crack. I reckon it's I was listening to a story about Japanese salarymen, which are quite famous, and they had this concept, and I think it's changing in Japan a bit now, but they would be the company man, or the salaryman as they call them, for their whole career. So they do the same thing as our grandfathers probably, our city grandfathers would have done. Start at 18, stay at a company till 65, retire, go play golf. But what Japanese guys do is they then go and do their ikigai or whatever. They go and do the thing that they really want to do, right? So they end up going and doing pottery or craft or woodwork, or they tend to go into doing some craft or artwork, and they dedicate the rest of their lives to that. Yeah. And it's really interesting. So there's this idea of I have my corporate life, and then I have the life that I was meant to do. Like it's really and I think it's a bit of a shame that you can't do both at the same time. When I think are we learning from that over time and getting better at blend? And I think even in Japan, from what I read an article the other day, it is changing now. So the concept of a lifelong salary man, which is how they refer to them. Yes. It's Japan. Is changing. So it's corporations are having to, just like companies here did, I don't know how many years ago, have to adjust to the new reality. Right? Yeah. So those, but they'll change slower in some cultures and it's not in others. But it's funny listening as you were speaking, and you obviously you picked up on it, but as you're speaking, and I automatically in my head
go to say the women's role in those things and when women are in careers and so on. Your story is about the way it was or a different culture, so it's very different. And I think what I'm loving about in more recent times, it's actually the languages around the woman as a career as well, and then the women as part of farming businesses and so on as well. So as I've shared before, I've learned to reflect as part of my leadership and automatically go and women, but it's like it wasn't the case back then. So it's just in my mind that the rabbit warren in my head goes to that.
I reckon in many cases it was the case, but it just wasn't visible. So I don't know how you notice, but every time I'm asked to attend or speak at a farm business group, almost certainly 90% of the audience is female.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
If I went to a field day, almost 90% of the audience is male.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
No,
That used to be very.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I
it's
always found that like farming. So when people have asked Nat and I how we work together, they go, well, where we've come from, every partner's worked together. So male and females have always worked together in agriculture.
Yes.
And I don't know about every family, but it's the stereotype. More often than not, the ladies in the business have done more of the admin side of the business traditionally, or the business side of the business. Us guys are there to lift heavy things. But what's happened, as I've noticed, is essentially all the women in ag have almost owned the business, this business side of ag, and that's become quite powerful. A lot of the groups, a lot of the driving of the, this professionalisation of ag has been female driven, as in part from my observing rather. I'm not on the inside, so I can't talk to it.
I think the physicality has been made easier as well with technologies as well. There's no reason I've got friends who are out driving trucks for harvest and so on as well, because it is made easier. Because our bodies are not necessarily made for lifting heavy things.
But I've seen you lift
I
heavy pole bills and check on the back of you.
Yeah, some of us took a while to learn and suffering the consequences now. I get really excited about seeing that there's literally nothing a female can't do in any farming business anymore. I always giggle about, so back when I was getting involved off farm in industry things, so being involved in committees and going to field days and so on, and very, very few role models for me to look at who else was out there doing it, and I struggled with you can't be what you can't see, because I did, and there weren't very many other women doing, like if I went to a field day I'd be one of the only ones, if not the only female, which was cool. Like I had so many things I could learn, and I giggled out. I often quite enjoy sharing with people. They go, the problem with gender diversity in agriculture, I have to queue for the ladies' toilets now.
So true.
And I giggle when I go to events and I'm standing in a big long queue and the blokes are just walking straight in and out of the cubicles or going to a train.
Behind the rainwater tank.
And I look at that and I smile to myself and go, how cool is this? Look at all.
Well, these days when you have a field day, you probably have to get a whole lot of portaloos.
Yeah.
Before you just had a rainwater tank and a few trees.
And David, I would never have imagined that day, and so I love that my measure of gender diversity in the agricultural sense is around toilets. It's kind of where my humour is usually.
I was actually talking to some staff members the other day about country pubs. You don't, and I was even they used to say in the city, and they used to have like the number of bars. You used to have the front bar, the back bar, and the lounge bar.
Yes.
Right, and the front bar never has a female's toilet.
And children weren't allowed to go in the front bar.
No. But notice how, like, even at the country pub,
I thought of that. You're right. That's it.
The front bars don't have a female toilet.
Never crossed my mind.
They're always somewhere near the back of the pub in the lounge.
Yeah, they still are. Wow, that's never crossed my mind.
Whereas I was at a restaurant on Sunday night, and they no longer have gender-specific toilets. They just have toilets they're all shared.
So that's what I love in the agricultural industry. Is it's one in all in, and embracing of anybody, and that goes to skills and interests and abilities too. I'm mentoring somebody at the moment that doesn't have an agricultural background, really excited about being part of the industry. We need to help somebody like that has skills that aren't agricultural but some amazing other skills. Help them with the ag stuff, because that's the stuff you can teach. So as any business owner, you say, well, I can teach any skill, but I can't teach attitude. So you're actually looking to employ people that have got the good attitude, which is no different in ag. So it's like there's a whole lot of people out there with an amazing attitude, and also going back to the Simon Sinek about purpose. They've driven with a purpose to want to work in our industry. We can teach them the ag parts. It's a bit tough to teach all the acronyms, but we can work on that.
Mind you, I always say our company has the worst. We have accounting, software, and agriculture, and they're all so acronym related. So, but okay, and
as
almost
Miss Newdew, can I point out?
We're talking about attracting people and giving them the ag stuff, but also breaking down those assumptions around ag, like lifting heavy things you mentioned, right? And especially in the days of OH&S, people go, girls can't lift the things they need to in ag. Well, you shouldn't have been lifting them in the first place.
Well, nobody should probably be lifting the 120 kilo weight.
Yeah, no, well, just get something to lift it.
Yes,
and that's the thing. If a lady, regardless of strength, couldn't lift, let's assume they couldn't lift that thing, well, then no person should be lifting that.
Yeah, and that's what I love about where ag and the general tech world is going. What's the problem that we're trying to solve? So it actually ends up revolving around what's the problem, and then working from there. And so when you can introduce anybody into our industries, when you go and you put a farmer in a room, you go, if you're using the lift heavy things analogy or reality, that's the problem. I really struggle because I need to do this, and then you put in a room of people with a computer software background or a design software design skill, and they go, have you thought about doing this? And of course we haven't in the agricultural area, because we either didn't know it existed, didn't know it was possible, hadn't thought about it because we're too busy thinking about what else we need to do.
Or even preset assumptions. Here's a good example. With automation, we're moving towards automation of farm machinery, or fully autonomous. And everyone had this thing in their head, oh my God, can you imagine this massive header with a 40-foot front walking around autonomously? But then you look at this work that they've done at Swarm Farm and other places around the world, and they go, well, if you don't actually have to have someone in it, why do you need such a big machine? Why can't you have 30 little ones? And it goes, never really thought of that. Right, so you don't need a big machine anymore. The only reason it's big is because you have one operator.
Yeah, and you also aren't limited by time, because it blows my mind. It's so cool when you think about a paddock that may have 15, 20 of those forms of robot, without saying brand name, going around that paddock 24 hours a day. So they do shift, they recharge themselves when they need to. Who would have thought? And then I love thinking, so what's the equivalent for the livestock industries? So what's the smart tech out there that can help us think differently as well, with some of the more labour intensive
someone will eventually invent a shearing machine. They've only been trying for 50 years.
Do you know what though? My absolute disruptive technology in my mind is virtual fencing. And so
is it successful in sheep yet?
It can be. Is it? Not yet. That's another rabbit warren, which I gladly go down. But the reason I bring it up is to go, I read something a while back when I was more deeply involved in the livestock industries, and somebody said, that was tried 15 years ago and it didn't work. And I went, that's correct, that's a valid view. And I look and go, but the technologies that we have now are not but, so yes. And the technologies we have now, maybe we need to actually revisit this, because it's still a problem. Whatever the problem is that was a problem back then, we've still got the problem now. So what technologies there's so much more out there now that we sometimes can revisit something if we focus on what is the problem that we're trying to solve.
And the problems, and I always say, because obviously we're in software, I'm just saying the problems look, people have new solutions to things and new ways of doing things, but look at what we do, which is essentially financial management. The actual, the mechanics of finance haven't changed in thousands of years, right? So the problem, we're just, you're learning and looking how to solve the problem, but the problem is almost the same, right? So the same with these problems on farms. So the use of land management units, or or even the ideas. I remember Einstein worked. They always say that he got so many ideas because he worked at a patents office, right? And there's so many patents in the patents office which are brilliant, but the technology's just not good enough yet.
It's not there yet. That's
right. But the idea is just sound as right. And so sometimes you just got to go back and go, gee, that was a really good idea in 1975, but they just couldn't pull it off.
And isn't that so? When you think of diversity, age diversity is so important as well. So you've got somebody that's got that new knowledge, then also the person that can see what the problem still is or what's tried. As long as everybody keeps talking about it and is open-minded.
Because I was like you, my brother and I tried strip grazing forever. We showed you.
Yeah. And
hoggets just love running through a temporary fence.
Yes, it's I've learned so much from early adopters of research. I remember standing in your paddock the first time I'd ever seen canola grazed, and it was down to the ground, and we're all looking going, oh geez, and I reckon your family were also going, oh, I don't know if this is going to come back or not, and it did, and so many learnings out of that. And I think the other thing that I love that the farming community does is people that are willing to share their mistakes and just go, whoops, got that wrong. And what have I learned from? I was talking to a farmer years ago around pastures, and he said, oh, we finally cracked it. It took us 5 years, but we've managed to do it. And I was like, wow, what kept you going to keep on trying for 5 years until you actually managed to achieve that to a point where it was adoptable? And they were like, I knew that somebody else was doing it, and that person was sharing their knowledge. It's like, how cool is it that there's that sharing of ideas, and they were just determined. They're like, this has to be able to work, and I'll just tweak things year by year. But 5 years before they actually managed to do it.
Thousands of these little experiments happening across. We were talking about grower groups the other day, and the power of grower groups and this thing. Because essentially you've got maybe 20 to 100 farmers all experimenting either individually together.
Farmers are the ultimate inventors, aren't they? And engineers.
And having support around that, like we used to have a great sheep consultant, which you knew was Kevin Bell. And my brother and I were, in hindsight, little nuts. We used to go, for example, we started grazing. We wanted to graze wheat and barley stubbles, but we had all these sheep, but the time involved of putting them, you used to put them on for an hour, take them off to try and stop them getting acidosis in their stomach. And we went to Kevin and go, God, we don't want to do that. There's got to be a different solution. We can just bung them on. And so, being a vet and a sheep scientist, he'd go away and he came up with a solution. He goes, oh, people do this in the pig industry all the time. So now it seems it's badass these days. So all we do is we bring in our 4,000 hoggets and drench them with antibiotics and chuck them straight onto barley stubbles, and it worked a treat. And then he would take that and go, okay, these mad boys and Mobrup did this and it worked. Do you want to adopt it or not?
A bit different in Mobrup. Weren't we?
But I love that. But then someone else will do something else on their farm, and we'd learn from that. And that's what I loved about those. Often you get them around consulting groups, but sometimes in grower groups as well.
And I'm still very involved in grower group land through my board role with the Grower Group Alliance. And the thing that the grower groups all over 80 around the state, and the thing that they do so well is that collaboration between farmers and researchers and extension agents and now the ag tech world as well. They're actually sitting together and doing that, and that's what grower groups do so well. And there's no vested interest, people just wanting to do more within their business and help each other. It's a phenomenal model. There's no model like it anywhere in Australia.
And I think that's the big difference that I found from an urban environment.
Well, there is around Australia, but not there's lots and lots of small ones in the isolated pockets.
And you would have found this, so now you're a Freo girl, but in business, in urban business, people don't share ideas like they do because we have competitors. So farmers technically don't have competitors, because we're all selling our commodities to another, whoever it is, right? but we don't compete against each other.
Yeah.
So the sharing of knowledge across farms
Yeah.
is something that you never see in any other industry, because everyone else holds that knowledge tight.
Yeah.
And so, which is why I think if you look at the only industry in Australia which has net positive productivity is agriculture. And I reckon that comes down to this free sharing of knowledge between stakeholders.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it, and the closeness of the researcher to the end user as well, so that the researchers are generally trying to help the producer do what they do more efficiently. So whether it's through wheat breeding, so you're actually going, how are we going to help the grower increase their yield? So we need to breed varieties in order to do that. So those sorts of things through the whole of the supply chain is really exciting though.
It is quite phenomenal. Now you're talking about young people earlier on, and you also launched a thing called Ag4U Career Pipeline Programme.
Ag4U.
Ag4U.
Yep.
Okay, oh, that's the second one I got wrong today.
AG number 4, the letter U. That's all right.
Ag4U. I even wrote it down.
Oh, you haven't got it in front of you. And you've got your glasses on.
I'm trying to say I'm old. All right.
No.
You know, Dad, I talked to my father today, who's 81, and he said, when I get old, I'm going to stop doing so much.
So he's never going to stop doing so much.
Well, the old bugger, he just went, I was talking to my mum the other day, he's written 2 programs, one for the Rotary. So this is 80, he started up his software development again. He's written a software program to manage the Rotary Club and the Bowls Club. And apparently he started a whole new project with a new code base the other day. So
Isn't that fantastic though?
yeah, so you're never too old.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, Ag4U Careers Program. Now, one of the things I got to, first of all, you can tell us a little bit about the program, but one of the things that fascinated when I talked to you on the phone about it, this modern problem of university, in the fact that well, yours probably didn't, but my boys have certainly experienced, is you never meet anyone at uni anymore.
Yeah, it's become really, really hard for for the uni students, because they've got other, not that we didn't have other things that we needed to do at the time, but the uni students have got a lot of other pressures on them that are taking precedence of necessarily being at uni, and so they can actually be at uni without actually having to physically be there like we had to. So it's a very different landscape. So if I step back, so 2 driven, very different children of mine, and one studied in one area and has gone into the physiotherapy line, so it's been fascinating talking about those sorts of careers. And then my daughter, who did animal science, studied animal science and came out with an animal science degree, and so an honours one. And you get to have conversations with your children as they get older about what career opportunities are out there and how information flows through. And I observed with some degrees that it's actually really hard to find a job. If you're a physio or a lawyer or a doctor, then you put that in Seek and up come all the jobs. When you've done animal science or whatever, or an ag science degree, those sorts of things don't pop up. Agricultural scientist or an animal scientist necessarily. It's not necessarily easy to find the jobs. But then also the unis are they've got so much to pack into a short space of time when they've got the students there. So it's very hard for them to do everything that's required to bring somebody out at the end with the sorts of skills that industry needs. So years and years ago, I made up Sheep Camp, and so I actually wanted to help students learn the context of what they were learning at uni. So, for example, you'd learn that worm eggs in sheep. So you'd learn about the science of that. Well, in a lot of cases, a lot of the students coming into these degrees didn't necessarily have an agricultural background and so on. So we need to create an opportunity for this. So I made up Sheep Camp. So the students would actually come down, drench a sheep.
You can make them do all the fecal count collection as well?
We went out and we collected sheep poo, and we mashed it up, and we did all the things that I grew up doing. And then, actually handling an animal, finding out how physically hard it is to drench a sheep. And you talked about getting up 4 o'clock in the morning doing 1,000. There's smarter ways of doing things now, but we need those sorts of experiences in order for people to go, bugger that, I don't want to have to trench, I won't get them all done before the cricket starts, so I need a new way. So without that experience of physically doing those things, I thought I want to create that. So I created a weekend, and so students have come down and actually needle sheet, drench sheet, do pasture counts, and also learn about the whole business of farming. So it's all very well that you're told that you need a certain amount of in your paddocks for a yield. So, well, how about the budgetary impact? That you might be told you need X amount of units. Your budget's not going to afford that. So you're actually, so definitely the business side, because it's not all just sheep and crops and tractors.
Do you
And
know,
so on.
John Francis, I talked to him about how did you, when I did his interview, and John Francis has been a consultant in the East Coast for a long time, and he started off in agronomy, I'm trying to remember, but he got on a farm and he goes, well, I'm advising these farmers on what to apply and what to do, but he goes, I don't know if it's actually worth doing. Like, and he goes, I know from a production point of view it's a good idea, but I don't know whether it's a good idea financially, and that sort of led him into exactly what you're saying, to go, okay, how do I get to understand what's the best financial advice I can give them, not what's the best agronomy advice, because they're not the same thing.
Yeah, and we need people to be in the industry thinking about that holistic approach. So did sheep camp, that was cool, and one of the students at the time went, oh, this would be so good to be doing this, I wish there was something like this in cropping, and I went, oh, congratulations, you just invented a crop camp. You can sign up for that, we've just made that up. And then did the same in the horticultural industry, so did hort camp. Anyway, so then I did that for a few years, and really, really satisfying, really valuable. And then COVID happened, and so I was like, oh, okay, so I won't do anything like that anymore. And over COVID, going, radio, so what can I do? And then I thought, well, we also have skills of needing to help students learn how to network into the ag industry and build their confidence to be able to have some confidence about breaking into our industry, especially if they didn't come from an ag background. But as one of the students said to me, he said, oh, I can talk farming anytime, like I can rock up at a clearing sale or at the pub and talk farming. He said, I'm looking at a banking career, I don't know how to talk banking. And so just because they come from a farming background doesn't mean they necessarily have the confidence to move into a career still in the ag sector. So then I developed the Ag4U Career Pipeline Programme, where I could actually teach them online or bring people in to help them learn about emotional intelligence, of why are you too scared to put your hand up to ask a question, what's the emotion that's driving that, and so then giving them the tools of how to address that emotion in order to, for example, make them brave to put their hand up and ask a question, not be uncomfortable that it might be perceived to be a stupid question, because it won't, all those sorts of things. So I did that for a couple of years over COVID, and the one thing that was really missing was having everybody in a room together. And so then I've been working with Murdoch University this year and delivering it in person to teach them, and also how to dress. I had one great student that said, oh, can I come and talk to the students, because I just want to reinforce to them that he rocked up on his first day at work wearing a tie, and he got paid out on for the rest of the time in that particular, I won't mention any businesses, but in that business you don't wear a tie. His perception of coming across to give a professional look was to wear a tie. And he's like, I so want to tell them all that if you end up doing that kind of job, you don't have to wear a tie. So there's those sorts of things that we also learn from the students, that, or the new professionals, the young professionals that have only been out of uni for a few years, come back and tell the final years what you've learned, what you did that you think you probably shouldn't have done.
Do you know what the other one is? I always say to young people, and I said, never dress up. Even if you're not from, say, a farm or a district, don't try and dress up to match it. Don't pretend, right? Because if you rock up to a farm, let's say in the Eastern Wheat Belt, and in a set Aaron Williams top to bottom with a big hat on, no, it's just got outsider written all over it, right? And that'll be different for every area, isn't it? Like so. It matters. It shouldn't matter, should it? But it really goes, oh, you're not one of us.
It's so funny though, when I'm still learning those things. I was over at an event on the East Coast at a field day, and I had my Blundstones on, And so then I was standing there, and there was another person from Western Australia there, a person that was early career, and I heard her last name, went, "Oh, you're from Darkin."
Yeah.
She said, "Yeah, I am. How did you know?" It's going, "Well, your name's such and such," so I just had a stab and I was right. And so she pointed out to me, she said, "Oh, it's pretty funny, you can tell who the West Australians are, can't you? Because the boots that we wear are completely different. They're not as pointed as the farmers over there, so on the eastern side of the country. So even the little things, and I'm still going, oh my goodness, so they are identifiable, but I'm not going to wear different boots." But it was just that
it is really identifiable. So even when I talk to our marketing gang and they pull up a photo from even an Australian site, and I go, that's a wrong photo. Why? And I go,
no overalls, no wheat behind the ear.
Oh, puffer jackets. Like there's a
Tasmanian tuxedo, I've been called.
Yeah, and I go, where does that? Oh, they're probably a poppy farm in Tasmania.
Yeah,
right? And I go, oh, yeah, that person. You look at a photo and you go, Western District, Victoria.
Yeah,
you know, people have a look. At least people in Queensland generally wear a big hat so you can tell where they're from. But each state in particular, but even some regions within states, and I imagine the same as in all the other countries, have a look.
And that's one of the privileges I've had from working nationally as well, is you actually learn all the different characters around and meet people from different areas. And just coming back to the other piece on people having confidence in themselves and not feeling like they have to dress differently. The other thing that I learned from one of my speakers speaking to the students, I really, really loved, because it kind of circles back to what I've always thought about having a father that was a member of parliament, that you just go, oh, I can't go up and talk to them because they're a member of parliament. And I'm like, it's my dad. Like, for real? Just go and ask him. And that's what I often used to think when people would feel like they need to treat people differently. And one of the really, really valuable lessons that I heard one of my panellists say to my students is, come up and talk to me anytime. And he said, don't feel like you need to tell me what I already know. He said, don't feel you can't come and talk to me because you don't know what to talk to me about. I want to hear about you. I want to hear about what you're interested in or what you're studying. So that gave the students suddenly permission to go, I can go up and talk to anybody because I don't need to be worrying about, oh my goodness, I don't know what they know. Because I thought that was a really valuable lesson, and that they are somebody's father, mother, son, daughter. They are a normal person. So I always say to the students, just rock up, be polite and respectful, read the room, but just go up and have a conversation and start with a big brave hello, I'm such and such.
Especially with the title. People always mention there's this gravitas with titles, you know, the CEO or the whatever, right? But you're so right. You know, this is, first of all, if they're in a big company, they're worried about stuff that, you know, they're just not you. We're all messed up, they're nervous, they're worried about this, they've probably got something else they're worried about that they haven't achieved in their own job, and you might be the thing that really makes a difference, right? Yeah. But again, is somebody's dad, grandpa, son, whatever, and they still have to go home and put the kids in the bath. And,
absolutely,
you know
everybody, and sometimes love the break from this refreshing young person, new person, older person that's come and had a chat. That actually, I was going through the security at the airport numerous times, but in this particular, I was wearing my bright orange boots that I just love. And so they're a little bit bright, and so I had to take them off because they had steel in them. I took them off and put them, as I got through security, I put them back on. The lady in front of me said, oh, I like your boots. I said, thank you, Governor. And it was Governor Sanderson, which she said was a normal person. I don't think I said Governor actually, because she was a normal member of the public, but I knew that she was. But it's like, no, she loved my boots, and I was like, oh, no, they're cool, aren't they? And so we got chatting about my bright orange boots with a normal member of the public that I happened to know was the Governor.
And do you know, what I found, if people are in public life, they love public. I mean, that's true. Generally, like, they're good at chatting. You know, and they're generally pretty nice people, otherwise no one voted for them.
And also, I think, and equally, even though it's people that aren't in public life, if you're a researcher that is really, really passionate about the work that you do, and they might not love situations where they have to talk to a lot of people necessarily, absolutely very, very keen to talk about the work that they're doing and look for those opportunities, because there are some phenomenal people out there. Or I often say to people, as an industry, if there's a group of students that go along to one of our events, and I've been guilty of it, and I've gone, oh, what a shame, they're all over in the corner at morning tea talking to each other. I used to not go over there and say, hello, I'm Erin here, come and meet some people, or break into that. So I think it's also, we have a responsibility to help people move into the industry as well, because it's not easy. So if it's a researcher that has some fascinating research and you've seen that that's who it is, and you want to go over and have a chat and ask about what they do.
And I think anyone at any level, in any organisation or any position, loves talking about what they do, don't they? So if you just ask people to drill deep and listen, and then do active listening, and ask people follow-up questions. They will always.
That's right, and the skill of asking an open-ended question. See, I'd rather find out about other people. So doing something like this, I'm not going to come and talk about myself. But
mind you, this is why I love doing this, is because I get to ask people about them. Right. And the only difference now is I'm doing it with a microphone.
That's right, exactly.
I'll do it anyway.
We've done this over coffee before in the past, so you said I'm not getting to ask you all the questions, so that sucks.
Yeah, there's the power and balance. But really, the impetus for this podcast was really, I was talking, is that I was having these conversations that you and I are having, and it would have been at an ag event or afterwards, or and I go, wow, other people need to know what Erin knows, right? And often, if you're not speaking a lot, say in a big forum, or maybe it was to 60 people, if you can get that to more, that's part of this, getting the communication out there.
Absolutely, and making use of people's time and getting these podcasts in front of people to get them to think of listening to a podcast, or get that. So that's the challenge as well. There's lots of good information out there.
So that's the other thing you do in the car, listen to podcasts.
See, I'm a music tragic. So
I
end up just.
Except for Birds of Fly, of course you listen to that.
That's right. I have been listening to that avidly.
Hey, let's finish off, because otherwise people will. Otherwise people will turn us off if you haven't turned us off. So thank you if you're still listening. I haven't started singing, so that's all right. So if you're still with us, thank you. I always finish with three questions, right? So first of all, farming myths. What is a really, I suppose, a farming myth that you can think about that you'd like to go, nah, that's BS. That it's a common. So you'd come across it in urban areas probably more now.
The farming myth is that it's farmers are only men. I think that's there's lots of different ones, but that would be probably the big one I really like to communicate. When I talk about a farmer, they come in all different shapes and sizes and genders and ages and all sorts of things. So a farmer is a farmer is a farmer, and whether they are doing the financial management of the business, or if they're making sure that all the HR is in place, they are a farmer. As well as if driving the tractor or moving the sheep or picking up parts in town. All of those people in my mind are farmers, and so that's the myth that I see, is that.
Do you know, I think I'd have to Google, maybe put in the show notes, but I found something the other day, is that globally there's more women farmers than male farmers.
Which doesn't surprise me if you start to define a farmer in a way that I just described.
Yeah, it's a bit like this idea in agriculture that 95+% of people in agriculture are not farmers. They do something else. So if you want an ag career, farming is a really small part of it.
And even the average age of a farmer, because of the way that farm ownership is set up, the average age of the farmer, technically, according to ABS, is a lot older than what the actual average age of the decision-making people on the farm are.
Yeah, it needs to almost be changed, the average age of someone working in agriculture.
I tried to get that put into a survey with a company that does surveys to try and actually ask that question as well. I'll keep working on that.
Yeah, there you go. I'll leave it to you. Young people, we talked about young people a lot on this podcast. So advice. So you've worked with a lot of young people in ag through your various roles. Someone comes up to you, you're at a conference, next year and someone comes up to you and goes, Erin, I really want to get into ag, I want to have a career in agriculture, have you got any advice for me? Where would you ask them? I mean, that's a big question for you. We could probably spend another hour on it. But have you got any petty advice for them that matters, do you reckon?
I guess my question to them would be, what sorts of things are you interested in? And then they go, I don't know, quite a lot of stuff. Or what has been your favourite unit at uni? Those sorts of conversations to get them to start to think about what they're interested in, because there are just so, like we touched on earlier on, there are so many different things. And I guess it's kind of what you asked, but slightly being political, and I'd still want to reinforce to people and young ones coming along that if somebody else thinks you can do something, you probably can, because it's often our own self-doubt or our lack of confidence or our imposter syndrome, whatever it is, that limits us. And so anybody that comes up to me and goes, I'd really like a career in agriculture, I'm just like, well, apply for all sorts of things, or here, talk to this person, because I'll happily suggest that you look up this website, or I'd always my contact first to say, do you mind if I give this person your number? Oh, look, I'm interested in becoming a livestock consultant. So it's like, well, what do you think they do? And then they quite often, well, I'm not quite sure, I think I want to do it. So go and have a chat, do some work experience, spend some time. I've never had anybody in my network say, no, I don't have time for a 20, 30-minute phone call with somebody to ask me some questions. But I think the next stage from that is just believing that if somebody else thinks you can do it, you can. And I still do that today. If somebody asks me, because a lot of what I do is voluntary, it's not part of the job, so quite a broad portfolio of different things. If somebody else can see, say the Council of Australian Arab Relations, for example, if somebody else can see that I could add value, or that I've got something that could provide some benefits, then they're going, yeah, okay, well there must be, I've drilled down on that a little bit more. So
Yeah.
It's a really long answer to your question.
No, it's good. It's this idea that there is no magic source here, isn't it? And also, I love the idea, if you talk to people about how they started and what they do, you know, let's say they were whatever role you're admiring, right? That person at some point was at uni flipping burgers, right?
Absolutely.
And so they all started where you are today, right? And so their path everybody's pathway will be completely different.
Yeah.
I was at our boys' school breaking up the other day, and they had a guest speaker, and he owns an investment bank and a bunch of other stuff. He was up talking about motivation, but I love it. He goes, boys, and he was supposed to talk this, success thing, they do to leave us at school. Anyway, he goes, there's no secret, right? He goes, I'll give you three things: make a decision, focus, work hard. That's it. Right?
Yep.
He goes, that's all it is. He goes, there's no hacking, magic, strategy, special course, whatever. He goes, you just got to choose something.
And making a decision can be one of the hardest things to start with.
Make a decision, focus on just that, don't dabble, and work really harder than anyone else, and you'll get it.
Yeah. It's focus and curiosity. I think curiosity is a really important piece, because then you're going to find out, and if there was a secret source, I would have thought it was curiosity. So, why is that so? Because that just takes you in all sorts of places and all sorts of conversations, and then working out how to find things out in an open-ended questioning way rather than closed, because otherwise that puts up the boom gates pretty quickly.
I tell my boys, I said, always be a scientist and never a prosecutor. So in a conversation, be like an annoying toddler. Why, right? But not like that. People get offended a bit by why, but it's the same stuff. Is that if you're